This is In Character. I'm your host, Gerard Robinson, Vice President for Education at the Advanced Studies in Culture Foundation.
Hello and welcome. I'm Catherine Bassett. I'm sitting in for Gerard Robinson, the Vice President for Education at the Advanced Studies in Culture Foundation. And welcome to an evening of one-to-one interviews as part of our In Character program. And tonight we are welcoming Anna East from Montana. And Anna, welcome.
Thank you so much, Catherine.
And Anna was part of a whole group discussion that focused on rural education. And so Anna, I'll start there. Why teach rural?
Well, I think that rural schools have a lot of things to offer that are surprising pieces of joy that people don't necessarily experience in those larger schools. Some things that I like to share are, when the school basketball team, for example, makes it to, a big tournament somewhere, like the whole community drives together essentially to these other communities. And, there's just a sense of connectedness in a small town, and rural schools sort of embody that. Kids, everybody knows each other, everybody knows each other's families. And if you teach in these schools long enough, you have the joy of sometimes teaching the children of your former students. And so it really is sort of a tree with long roots, and can be a really fulfilling teaching experience for some of those reasons.
I love that metaphor, a tree with long roots. I was just speaking with Luann Linskov from South Dakota and shared with her that I left my rural classroom when I was teaching my second grandchild of a student. And I decided at that point, you know what? You've been here for a long time. So, but that is one of the joys of teaching in a rural community, is that you're really connected to the families and to the community as well. You teach in a very special setting. Would you like to share a little bit about where you teach and what you've learned?
Sure. I teach in a public school on the Flathead Indian Reservation, and it's one of 7 high schools. So there's 7 school districts on the reservation, pretty small and pretty spread apart. Our student population is about 70% Native American, and they're from many different tribes, but primarily the tribes that belong to that reservation, which is the Salish, Kootenai, and Pend Oreille tribes. For me, coming from the East Coast and, as growing up on the East Coast and really knowing very little about, Indian country and Native communities, I, of course, had a lot to learn. And in fact, my first teaching experience was in a different school on the same reservation that was a tribal school. So it was a Bureau of Indian Education school with a very specific cultural focus. So I had a lot to learn. And to unlearn some things that I thought I knew, that I just had misconceptions about, which is probably pretty common across the country. So for me, I had a lot of personal learning, but also I think something that I notice when folks come to start at our school, either as a new teacher or as an administrator, unless they've had very specifically experience in a Native community, there are a lot of things they don't understand that are very different. There's a very strong connection, family connections here. When, someone passes away or something happens in a family, it often has ripple effects across the whole school district because everyone is interrelated. Or not everyone, but there's just a lot of connections and a lot of cross-town community connections as well. So even outside of our town, folks are related to folks up in other parts. And a lot of it is based very clearly on history and what happened when the land was divided up. So anyway, there's cultural differences that I had to learn. There's historical information that has been really beneficial to me. And just knowing that it is Indigenous communities are different. Even though we share so much with just a traditional rural or agricultural community, we have a lot of, I think, things that would make us stand out as well.
What's one of your greatest joys in teaching there?
I think because we have such small classes and small classes, and then because we know our students so well, I think that's been really important for me to be able to help us to get to know a student so well that I can tell, if they're doing some writing and there's some problem in their writing, and I know about their personality enough that I can actually figure out a way to approach that problem in a way that's going to get resolved, as opposed to like if I had 40 kids in a class or 30 kids in a class, I might not be able to get to know the kids that well, and I might have to apply a more sort of blanket approach to my teaching. I also love that I have so much freedom in the curriculum that I can choose and the books that I can teach. Part of that is just the quirks of, the administration that I've had, but it's also partly due to being a small town, small district. The parents give the teachers a lot of credit.
Sounds like a wonderful place to teach. So Anna, you were selected as your state's Teacher of the Year. Do you want to share a little bit about what that was like and what you learned as a result of that experience?
So I think one thing that especially teaching in a small school and then being sort of thrust into this larger, I guess, onto a larger stage, is just getting to know the problems, the challenges, and the successes across the country, not just in my own area or in my own state. That has been really eye-opening. I've had some other experiences as well that have been national kinds of groups. And again, you really get to understand what kinds of school situations people have, whether it's all the different issues that have come up over the last 10 years or 15 years or so. I think too that it has helped me to understand my place as a teacher leader, where when you are in a small district, you might be a big fish in a small pond, but it doesn't necessarily help you develop sort of the polish or the professionalism that I should speak for myself, that I was able to sort of pick up by being around other people that were so professional and polished. So I think for me, it's just been a little bit of taking the kid out of the country and letting me see a larger perspective.
Well, you've certainly done a great deal with that larger perspective. Is there anything that you didn't get to share in the whole group conversation that you would like our listeners to know about teaching in a rural community?
I think one thing that I may have actually talked about, but that I think is super important, is just to keep in mind that rural communities are so often overlooked because the population density and the population numbers are so much smaller than in urban areas and suburban areas. We have a lot to offer for teachers who are looking for good places to start teaching, but also we have some of the same problems that other districts that are in larger areas have as well. I mean, we have poverty, we have homelessness, we have substance abuse, and we have community members that may not care as much about the school as they do about other things. And so, I think it's helpful. It would be helpful to me if people in policymaking positions had rural schools in mind when they're talking about different policies, whether those are rules in schools, whether those are, trying to privatize schools or even choosing textbooks for schools. Those all affect rural schools a little bit differently. So I think that's what I would like to leave it with.
Thank you for that. That's very insightful. And I think I completely agree with you, having also taught in a rural school, that too often we are overlooked, our students are overlooked. And I really appreciate your making time to share some of the joys and some of the challenges that you've experienced in teaching in your rural school. So thank you, Anna.
Thank you, Catherine.